Greetings, Lumen students. It's week 3. This is your Thursday video, so glad to have you with us. We're preparing for our autobiography writing assignment, and those short stories that you're writing about your own life will be due next Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, depending on when you meet with your team. So on Tuesday, I'll meet with teams 1 and 2. Wednesday, I meet with teams 3 and 4, and Thursday, I meet with teams 5 and 6. So if you could have your autobiography ready by then, we're going to share them. You may want to have a picture or two that you want to include with that you could screen share for us. We would love to see any pictures that you have, as well as just hearing your stories. And we'll start to get talking more and more about your writing. We've also started our autobiographies, and you have found your parents have either talked to me about an autobiography that they want you to read, or a biography, or you have chosen one of the two that I have selected. And the two that I have selected for you is I Am Malala. There's a young student edition, or Unbroken, which is the story of Louis Zamperini. And there is again kind of a student edition of that book as well. So I want to show you just a couple of video clips about each of these people to start giving you a feeling about their biography, their stories, the things that make them so inspirational. This first one we're going to watch is an interview with Malala Yousafzai, and she is the author of the book I Am Malala. She's being interviewed by Diane Sawyer. So let's take a look at this one.
Tonight we are awaiting that other Nobel, the Nobel Peace Prize, historically awarded to men like Nelson Mandela. The average age of the winner is 62. But tonight, the youngest nominee is a 16-year-old girl.
Hey students, let me just give this a minute to buffer so it sounds a little bit better as you watch. You notice she says they're waiting to hear on the Nobel Peace Prize, normally awarded to adults for the work that they do for peace. And Malala was a candidate for that Nobel Peace Prize. So let's see if we're prepared.
The average age of the winner is 62. But tonight, the youngest nominee is a 16-year-old girl who spoke up for the 31 million girls around the world who do not get to go to school. She was shot in the head with a new book, I Am Malala, and her message that it is possible for every one of us to change the world.
Out of a valley 7,000 miles away, a powerful light.
We are starving for education. For us, it's like a precious gift. It's like a diamond.
Tonight, a tiny Pashto child may be the bravest girl in the world. Malala Yousafzai, who loved her little home and loved her school. When out of the shadows came the Taliban, the radical fundamentalist men who banned girls' schools, bombed them, threw acid at the students. They terrorized the town with corpses in the street, flogging women publicly. But somehow, Malala never lost her powerful certainty that girls also deserve life.
Cannot stop me. I get and if it's in home.
What's the moment you...
Somehow, Malala never lost her powerful certainty that girls also deserve a full life.
They cannot stop me. I will get my education if it is in home, school, or any place.
What was the moment you were most afraid, that you had the most fear?
Like, I was feeling fear all the time. At night when I used to sleep, I was thinking that, shall I put a knife under my pillow? I think life is always dangerous. Some people get afraid of it, some people don't go forward. But some people, if they want to achieve their goal, they have to go.
And so, somewhat like Anne Frank, Malala decided to write a diary and send a message to the world, anonymously. And then at age 11, on camera, online, one of her first interviews calling for help.
We must have the confidence to say that this thing is going wrong, and we must raise our voice.
And by her side, navigating through fear and hope, her father, a teacher who knew his little girl was all possibility.
When I saw her for the first time, a very newborn child, and I looked into her eyes, I fell in love with her, believe me. I love her.
The New York Times heard about her and filmed a documentary. Her name was becoming famous inside Pakistan.
I think we should not put out the camera, okay?
When the radical Taliban decided her message was so strong, they would take her life. With her childlike, magical thinking, Malala says she rehearsed in her mind what she would say if an attacker came.
It was always my desire before the attack that if a man comes, what would you tell him, Malala? I used to think like that. I would tell that man that I even want education for your daughter.
And you think that would work against a gun?
But I thought that words and books and pens are more powerful than gun.
A year ago, in October 2012, she was on a school bus, like the one children still ride in Pakistan. Her friends were singing.
On the day when I was shot, all of my friends' faces were covered except mine.
Was that wise? It was brave, but was it wise?
At that time, I wanted to live my life as I want.
She says she noticed on that day the road was strangely quiet.
I didn't see those men. I just could see like there's no one. There used to be a huge crowd on that road, and on that day there was no one.
Two men approached, one of them with a Colt 45. He climbs on the bus and asks the question, "Who is Malala?" She doesn't remember what happened next, but her friend told her.
She said like, you said nothing, and you were just holding my hand, and you just squeezed my hand like you were just forcing it, and you said nothing. And she said like you just looked at the man like this. Then she said like, then he fired three bullets, and one hit you on the left side of my head. I would have been doing like this, so I hide my face because there was gunpowder on my fingers.
A child gravely wounded. And how she would survive is simply a testament to miracles, including the impossibility of a specialist from England who happened to be in Pakistan and rushed to help save her.
The chances of being shot at point blank range in the head and that happening, I don't know. But it is amazing, truly amazing. I don't know why she survived.
Someone theorized maybe his hand was shaky.
He hit her there.
Miracle?
If you believe in miracles, yes, absolutely.
Maybe. It's the backbone and here's the brain, and God saved me.
Malala says maybe death was just not ready to take her.
I think death didn't want to kill me, and God was with me, and the people prayed for me.
And tonight, from her speech at the United Nations to the possible Nobel Prize, she has an answer to the question asked by that gunman. Who is Malala?
And I say, I am Malala, and I'm going to publish a book. And I want to tell girls all around the world that education is important. Raise up your voice for education. They thought that the bullet would silence us, but they failed. I am Malala! I am Malala! Weakness, fear, and hopelessness died. Strength, power, and courage was born. We are Malala!
And tomorrow, her new book, I Am Malala, hits bookshelves. And later this week, we'll tell you more about that series of miracles that saved her life. And also, we'll take you inside the world of radical Muslims, including women, asking them to explain why they think a child could be such a threat. And that will be Friday, a special edition of 2020 Unbreakable, an ABC News exclusive at 10 p.m. Eastern.
Hey students, I hope you enjoyed that. It's so inspiring. All she wanted to do was go to school, something that we take for granted. She wanted to learn, and she's continuing to learn. She's really inspiring to me, so that's an awesome story. We'll be talking more about her, and I'll share you more video clips as we go along. The other option you could choose from was Unbroken, and this is a different kind of character. Louis Zamperini. This is towards the end of his life. He just died last year, I believe, right before the movie came out. But this is an interview with him, so let's take a look at it.
Including.
So what else do you have here?
This is a Japanese copy of the samurai sword that they decapitate you with.
Louis Zamperini's home is too small to hold memories of a life so long. There are the trophies honoring his athletic accomplishments.
These are the 5 torches I carried.
So these 5 torches you carried in.
Let's give that a minute to buffer again, students, so you can hear it a little bit better. I told you at the beginning that Louis Zamperini was an Olympic athlete. He competed in the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, and then he was drafted into the war. He joined up and entered World War II, where kind of his trials and circumstances kind of combined to test him. His plane was shot down. He was in the ocean, stranded for many, many weeks. And then he and his crewmate were rescued, but they were rescued by the Japanese and were put in a prisoner of war camp. So that's kind of the basic part of his story. I'm going to just rewind a bit to see if we can buffer that and if it'll sound a little bit better for you.
Decapitate you with.
Zamperini's home is too small to hold memories of a life so large. There are the trophies honoring his athletic accomplishments.
These are the 5 torches I carried.
So these 5 torches you carried in 5 different Olympic ceremonies.
And then there are the souvenirs from the prison camps where he spent 2 years of his life.
This is the fork I used. It's a bamboo fork.
An old belt buckle.
I'm surprised the Japanese didn't take it away from me because they were short of brass.
But Louis Zamperini's story was pretty much ancient history. An elderly man waving in a parade. Until a best-selling book reminded the world of his harrowing tale. His first fame came when he was just a teenager. In 1936, he made the U.S. Olympic team. At 19, he was the youngest qualifier in the 5,000 meters. He didn't win, but Louis Zamperini became a household name, a sports hero. A few years later, the nation was at war. Zamperini was a bombardier, Army Corps. In May 1943, his B-24 crashed into the Pacific.
Our number 1 engine, the RPMs dropped. This plane was barely flying with 4 motors, and with 2 gone, it just dropped like a rock. And so we hit the motor nose down. I felt like someone hit me in the forehead with a sledgehammer. The plane was completely blown apart.
What happened next was documented in this 1998 story from correspondent Bob Simon.
Zamperini spotted a life raft floating rapidly away from the burning waters. He swam to it.
47 days in an inflatable raft.
We never prayed before, but on a raft you pray like a foxhole.
He fought off sharks and battled the sea. Things went from bad to worse. Zamperini was near death when he was captured by the Japanese and taken to a place known as Execution Island, where every known prisoner had been put to death.
They took great joy in telling us we were going to be executed, and they'd always go through the motion.
It got even worse. His fame back home led to hours of torture and beatings at the hands of a sadistic guard nicknamed the Bird.
I couldn't bear look in his eyes. I just couldn't do it. To me, they were that sadistic.
When he wasn't being beaten, he was starved, like most of the Americans held by the Japanese, but somehow he survived. Louis Zamperini returned home a hero.
This is your life.
There were TV appearances. His life appeared to return to normal. But the war years, while gone, were anything but forgotten. Haunted by nightmares, he turned to alcohol. Then, in a last-ditch effort to save his marriage and perhaps his life, Zamperini joined his wife Cynthia at a prayer service led by a young Billy Graham. Graham's sermon touched on the power of forgiveness.
It was the first night in 2 years and a half that I didn't have a nightmare, and I haven't had one since. So the forgiveness, it was the complete healing factor in my life.
Which is why Zamperini decided to commit himself to a lifetime of forgiveness. And that meant he had to go back to Japan to see the prison guards who'd tried so hard to destroy him.
The most important thing in my Christian life was to know that I not only forgave him verbally, but to see him face to face and tell him that I forgave him.
That was more than 60 years ago, and our story would end there, were it not for the book Unbroken.
This is the English version.
Here's Louis.
He became a celebrity all over again. Readers clamored to see him,
And I said, no way.
to hear him, to applaud his life.
When you finished reading that book, what did you think?
It put me back in prison. And I had to stop and look out the window to be sure I wasn't back in prison.
Did you ever imagine it would be a bestseller?
Well, she's a great writer.
She is author Laura Hillenbrand. Her last book was the bestseller Seabiscuit. Unbroken took her 7 years to research and write. But in all that time, you may be surprised to learn that the author and the subject of her story never met, not even once.
Hillenbrand never met Zamperini because at the time she was suffering from a chronic illness that made it difficult for her to leave her home here in this neighborhood of Washington, D.C. So we spoke with her the same way Zamperini did, on the phone.
Patients often go into times where they are literally unable to get out of bed for weeks or months or years. And it was something that helped me identify with Louis because his story is largely about suffering.
Hillenbrand says she thinks not meeting Zamperini actually made her book better.
Because when he was telling me his stories, I wasn't looking at a 90-year-old man. I was thinking about a 17-year-old runner or a 26-year-old guy out on a life raft. And I was able to visualize it.
But while Hillenbrand came to know nearly everything about Zamperini, he knew almost nothing about her.
When the papers printed her story, I couldn't believe it. The only thing I could do, and I felt was proper, I sent her one of my Purple Hearts, and I said, you deserve this more than I do.
Why did you feel she deserved it more than...
Well, she's been suffering for 30 years. I suffered for a couple of years.
Turns out the 47-year-old author and the aging veteran shared much more than the past.
Laura has said that when times get really tough for her, she calls you.
We talk to each other on the phone. Okay, so people say, oh yeah, Lou's my inspiration. Well, I might say that she's my inspiration.
When we talked, Zamperini said he hoped one day to meet Hillenbrand, that he had a message.
Well, I don't think we'll tell each other very much except I love you.
Not long after, that hope became a reality. While in Washington in 2012, he paid a visit to her home.
He told me as we were hugging each other and saying goodbye, he said that the book was the crescendo of his life. And he believes he's lived this long so he could see it written and read. And that was the loveliest thing he's ever said to me.
As for Louis Zamperini, he had something to share with all his newfound admirers.
You forgave your Japanese enemies. Do you think Americans forgive enough?
No, I think that's the hardest thing in life, I think, is forgive. Hate is self-destructive. If you hate somebody, you're not hurting the person you hate, you're hurting yourself. And that's a healing. Actually, it's a real healing. Forgiveness.
Hey students, isn't he awesome? And his author, who is sometimes bedridden and could barely even walk, get out of bed. She wrote this amazing book, was inspired by him to keep going, to keep trying, even though she was so sick herself. So it was kind of fun to see that, and I hope you will choose one or the other of those stories, or a story that your parents would like you to use as an autobiography. Have them email me and we can decide if that's appropriate, something different for you. We're going to be talking about those two books a little bit more and learning a little bit more about them. I want to just end with our spelling words. I can bring them over for you. We're going to get some new ones next week. Okay, so I'm wondering if you can see which, I need to combine some here so you can see them all. If any of these words could be used in a sentence about Louis or about Malala. Okay. See if you can identify which of these words could be used in a sentence about Malala. Let's start with her. Okay. How about on this first line? Could you say a lot? Malala has been through a lot of things in her very short life, right? Okay, meaning many. How about this version of a lot? The Taliban wanted to allot a bullet, to set aside a bullet just for her. I don't know if that exactly works, but we could use that. Did we hear anything about a cache? A place where she stored her treasure? No, I don't know that that works. Or cash? Maybe she's going to earn some cash from the book that she is donating a lot of to helping girls in schools. She didn't need to be bailed out of prison. Dawn. Okay, I know she would say she would wake up each morning and be grateful that she was still alive when her life was threatened and there was a bounty on her head. You can be inspired by Malala. I'm sure she fainted from loss of blood. And maybe the gunman did a feint or a trick when he jumped up into the bus and fainted, okay, to the right towards her, asked her her name. Did he greet her? He hailed her? No, not exactly. Was she hale? I don't know that she was healthy or well after the bullet. Gate, idol. Now she is an idol, isn't she? She's someone that we can look up to. And she believes that all girls need an education. Okay? I'd like you now, students, to just take a scrap piece of paper, any piece of paper, and I want you to write some sentences about Louis Zamperini using any of these words. Okay? Could you, from the video that you just watched, could you use this in a sentence about Louis? I think you could. Okay. Could you use this in a sentence about Louis? He was a runner, so maybe you could talk about his gait and how fast he was. Maybe you could use this one, of course. Do you think the guards ever used their knees to hurt him? Yeah, definitely, in the prisoner of war camp. Do you think he ever fainted from pain or lack of food? I think he probably did. Okay. What about the morning? Could you write a sentence using Don about him? Yeah, I think you could. I loved his message of forgiveness. Students, if you could quickly just use these words that we're studying this week to write down 5 sentences about Louis Zamperini. I know you don't know a lot about him, but from that video, what could you say that would help you use some of these words in a sentence? I think that's all that I have for you today, students. It was a fun first week. We were able to see some awesome prezzies. I was really impressed. So let's log off. I'm going to be posting a spelling quiz that you'll be able to take on some of these words, as well as you can turn in your autobiography to me, your prezzy to me as well. And we'll begin working on starting to read these autobiographies or biographies about Malala and Louis. And we'll catch you next week. Thank you.